And we are back. Today, we are reacting to Why Flawed Abilities Are More Interesting by Pint is Here. So, I saw the title of this video and saw the thumbnail and was very interested on why flawed abilities are more interesting. Now, I do kind of believe that whenever there is a weakness in an ability, that it is kind of better for storytelling purposes. Like, of course, in the media that it's in, having a ability that hurts you or has some kind of drawback is not ideal for the character, but it is interesting to see how the character deals with that. So, let's just see what this video has to say about it.
Let me ask you a quick question. At what point in a story are the protagonist's abilities at their most interesting? If you take a moment to
I would say at the very beginning of the series, when the main character is trying to figure out their abilities and trying to think of creative ways. So it could also be in, I guess, the middle slash near the end of the series when they're training, once they already have the basics of their abilities down, and then are coming up with creative ways to use their abilities to surprise the enemy.
really think about it, the vast majority of you will probably come to the same conclusion that it's at the tail end of the series. And
So yeah, I was partially right at the tail ends, but I mean, it could also be good at the very beginning or kind of millish.
completely understand that viewpoint. By the end of the story, the protagonist has likely reached the pinnacle of their strength, perfecting every skill they've picked up since the beginning, and often unlocking some kind of
That's kind of funny to show Goku because every single series he gets a new form and reaches a new pinnacle. And does he really get different moves? I feel like it's just transformations because aside from the Kamehameha, Goku really doesn't do different moves.
god tier endgame power that ends up defining the character in all future power scaling debates. And for the most part, I completely agree with this perspective. There's definitely something satisfying about seeing a protagonist you've grown attached to fully master their abilities. But even so, I've always had a soft spot for a different period in their growth. Right around, say, the 30% mark of the story, when they've unlocked their long-term abilities, but they're still rough around the edges, unpolished, learning, because to a large degree, I believe there is a kind of beauty in imperfect abilities, one that allows writers to create more engaging scenarios and battles than perfect abilities allow. So what is it that makes these flawed, incomplete powers so interesting? How do great writers portray the early stages of a character's growth in a way that's compelling? And what are some standout examples of this being done well? That's what we'll be exploring in today's video, so stick around, you might just learn something important.
Okay, that's very interesting on all the examples they've shown so far. Because I forgot Demon Slayer had a flaw or drawback to their power up. All the other examples are interesting choices. Now, I don't know about Jujutsu Kaisen. I can't remember off the top of my head. I guess Sakuna is the drawback there. I'm trying to see. For Bleach, I guess it was the Hollow Mask. And what is the other one? Yeah, My Hero. Now, I don't know anything about Black Clover, so I have no idea what the drawback in that series is. And in Naruto, I'm guessing it's supposed to be the Nine-Tailed Fox, but at that point in the series, there was no drawback, so I don't know why he would show the war arc. Yeah, I can understand some of his examples, but some of them I can't understand.
Battles than perfect abilities allow. So what is it that makes these flawed, incomplete powers so interesting? You might just learn something important. So why do I enjoy the protagonist's imperfect abilities more than their fully realized endgame version? Well, it all comes down to one thing: flaws. When designing an ability, there's a sort of trifecta of flaws that a writer should consider. Each element adds depth and
Drawbacks, weakness, limitations. Okay, interesting. I don't know how he's gonna define each of these, But weakness, I'm guessing what counters that form or power up. Drawback, so I'm guessing some kind of thing that hurts the character that uses that ability. So either using a lot of energy, hurting themselves. I'm trying to think of something else, but I can't think of other drawbacks besides those basic ones and limitations. I'm guessing, like, even though the characters power up, they only have a certain amount of time or can only do so much with their powered up strength or speed.
Together, they shape how the ability interacts with the story. The first of these is the weakness, and is actually the least important of the three. Weaknesses are what counter the ability. It's useful to have a few in mind when crafting powers. Some writers go for hard counters, like an ability that becomes completely useless in the light, while others opt for a more indirect weakness, like situational disadvantages. But overall, this is the most superficial layer. The next trifecta is the limitations of the ability. These refer to the upper bounds of what the ability can actually achieve, the limits of its destructive power, the maximum output the user can reach, or the points where the character can't push it further. It defines the ceiling of their potential, at least for now. And then there's the drawback, which I believe is the most important and interesting piece of this trifecta. Drawbacks are consequences that directly punish the user for misusing or overusing their powers. Think of a character who burns themselves by pushing their fire abilities too far, or someone who suffers painful recoil from pushing their body beyond its limits. These drawbacks ground the power in risk and consequence, and that makes them fascinating. And therein lies the
So, yeah, I was pretty right on most of these.
drawbacks ground the power in risk and consequence, and that makes them fascinating. And therein lies the main issue with polished endgame abilities. Writers often completely erase this entire trifecta. As characters grow stronger, abilities tend to lose their limitations. What once had a strict boundary now feels limitless. Counters become irrelevant because the power is so versatile it can adapt to anything.
Yeah, that is the thing. It's like the character just overcame the weakness. So, I mean, somehow that technique doesn't hurt them anymore because their body is used to it, or they just use a completely alternative form that doesn't have the drawback, which is such a cop out.
And worst of all, the drawbacks, the essential elements of tension, are dropped altogether. And why is this a problem? Well, because you lose tension. You lose the sense of risk, of vulnerability, of creative problem solving. Flawed abilities act like puzzles. The protagonist has to think, adapt, and sometimes even suffer to make them work. That struggle adds a layer of complexity to the writing, and when it's gone, something vital is lost. And no part of storytelling makes this more obvious than with transformations. Only blah 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 percent, whatever, whatever. Okay, let's make a
Hold on,
patient.
what?
Only blah 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 percent, whatever, whatever.
I don't know what that's supposed to be a reference to. Kinda makes me think of Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods, is what he's mocking. Like when the villain says, "Oh, I'm only using this percentage of my power," or possibly when a hero is just saying, "Oh, I'm only going to use this much percent of my power," and then whenever they transform, it doubles, triples, or something else their power.
Back to the video. To be honest, I've never really loved transformations as abilities. Most of the time, instead of offering some unique new power or creative twist, they usually serve as a glorified stat boost. The character moves faster, the character hits harder, the character tanks more damage, and that's it. Just look at Ichigo's perfected Hollow Mask as one example. It's just a flat boost to his physical abilities. Sure, his attacks are black now or whatever, whoa, cool. But there's nothing really
Yeah,
interesting going on
chills.
besides, sure, his attacks are black now or whatever, whoa, cool.
Weren't they black already whenever he did Bankai? I could have sworn they were black and red. Because I don't remember him ever using blue Getsuga Tenshos when he was in Bankai. I always remember them being red and black.
But there's nothing really interesting going on besides him being stronger. Now compare these so-called complete transformations to the ones displayed earlier on in the series, and it becomes clear how much more compelling these early transformations were. One aspect that makes these early transformations so much better is the introduction of the Berserk state, where the character can only tap into their power while enraged or under extreme stress.
Yep, I do love that. That's usually always a great introduction to the form. So obviously he's using Attack on Titan as an example, but then Dragon Ball is also going to be another example.
losing control of themselves while doing so. And I have to say, I absolutely love these. Just take a look at Naruto's version 2 cloak. He can only access this form when emotionally overwhelmed, but the power increase is insane. It's destructive, raw, and comes with serious consequences. Unlike the perfected chakra cloak, which has almost no drawbacks, version 2 carries a real sense of urgency. The red cloak is literally formed by his blood boiling, cutting down his lifespan and destroying his cells. So even though we know Naruto gains the power to turn the tide of battle, we're still stressed watching it, wondering how he'll manage the aftermath. Or take Ichigo's earlier version of the Hollow Mask. Zangetsu would only step in when Ichigo was desperate, and even then, there was a constant threat of his inner hollow taking control. Every single time Ichigo was forced to use this form, it represented a failure of his ideals, having to borrow strength from the more primal version of himself, introducing an internal and deeper power struggle. These forms are so great because they introduce a second layer of tension. It's no longer just about winning the fight, it's also about managing the transformation itself. The protagonist is walking a tightrope, balancing risk with power and control. The limitation is that they can only access the form under extreme stress, and the drawback is that when they do, no one around them, not even themselves, is truly safe. But if you want an example of an early series transformation without the inner struggle dynamic, look no further than Kaioken. If you
But it's a technique, not a transformation. Some nerd going, but technically, it's a technique, not a transformation.
were to ask me what my favorite Dragon Ball transformation was, well, I'd have to go with the most iconic choice and say Super Saiyan. But don't get it twisted, Kaioken is right there behind it. Kaioken is a simple yet effective transformation that perfectly balances risk and reward, allowing the users to tap into increasingly higher multiplications of power at the cost of damaging their body. What I especially love about this transformation is how variable and dynamic it is. Goku can decide how far to push it moment to moment, sometimes dipping into higher multipliers extremely briefly to minimize damage, while generally maintaining a safer range.
I wonder, is he gonna show Super Kaioken? Or is he just gonna skip that and just do the canon versions, which is just regular Kaioken and blue Kaioken?
That element of choice and strategy is what makes it way more engaging than basic transformations that just hand out stat boosts with no real consequences. Now for the real reason I made this video.
Damn it, he did show Super Kaioken. I love his scream of when he's being damaged by Pycon and goes, Super Kaioken! And then breaks out of the Thunder Flash or whatever attack it was.
To rant about how One for All was more interesting in the first two seasons than in the entire rest of the show. I'm just kidding. Kind of. Super Strength is one of the most overused powers in all of fiction.
I do super agree with him that One for All was more interesting in the first two seasons when he was damaging himself. As soon as they started decreasing the power and being like, oh, if I only use 5% of it, my body can maintain or not damage itself doing that. It's like, come on, I kind of like the glass cannon.
Superman, Spider-Man. At this point, literally every shonen power system has it bundled in like it's part of a starter kit. But the early version of One for All
Hold
power
on,
system
I want to
has
go
it
back.
bundled in.
The Shonen Fighting Anime Starter Pack. Idiot Hero, Power of Friendship, lots of power ups. I hate that image so much. Bleach and Naruto, they're dabbing each other up because I'm guessing they both have power ups. Absent super important dad slash ancestor. Token evil teammate. Suspiciously effeminate villains. Too much bad filler. Oddly cute team pet. Fighting spirits. Cool old mentor. Probably a perv. Training story arc. Calling out attack names. Did we get him? No. I'm trying to see, what is that? That looks like Dragon Ball. I'm trying to see who's in that image. I don't know if that's supposed to be Gohan when he went Great Ape. Underwritten female leads. Tournament story arc. ring will get destroyed. That's funny. Gluttonous hero, pretty aloof big brother, story arc about rescuing a teammate, and unique energy slash power system. Ki Chakra Nen Forioku. Now, I don't know about the pretty aloof big brother. That just seems to be Inuyasha, but Naruto doesn't have that. Bleach doesn't have that. Hunter x Hunter doesn't have that. But I'm guessing most of the animes have this. Yeah, Fairy Tail doesn't have the pretty aloof big brother story arc about rescuing a teammate. I think that was funny and that one's pretty accurate.
In like it's part of a starter kit. But the early version of One For All, that was one of the most unique takes on super strength I had ever seen, and that's all because of its ridiculous drawback. Hirokoshi nailed the raw impact of the ability by making it physically destructive, not just to the environment, but to the user themselves. When Deku used One For All early on, his limbs literally shattered. And it's not just that. The wind howled and the air physically bent with every single punch. We as the audience didn't need to be told that One For All was strong. We could see it for ourselves. Remember when All Might literally changed the weather with a single punch? That's how you sell power. But what really sold One For All as special to me was the toll it took, the drawback. Seeing Deku burn through his own limbs like they're bullets in a chamber, shattering fingers, breaking arms, using already broken limbs to keep fighting, it's one of the sickest dynamics I've seen come out of a power.
God, that's so. Oh, man. His fingers already broken. I'm sure if this was real, that his nails would also be pretty busted slash coming off. Like, that's where I see the blood coming from. Not from his fingers, but from his nails.
System. Sure, he inevitably had to evolve past this level of self-destruction, but for me, that broken version of One For All, the version that majorly cost him something, is more interesting than any of the 6 quirks they later slapped onto him. And one of my favorite tropes to come out of this is when a character manages to use their abilities' drawbacks to their advantage. You don't get to see those kinds of scenarios with perfect abilities. Like with solo leveling, every single time an opponent tries to poison Jinwoo, nothing fucking happens because he's completely immune and his ability has no drawbacks nor limitations. I just roll my eyes because of how boring that is. Now compare that to Deku deliberately breaking his own fingers with One For All to break out of Shinso's brainwashing, and you can instantly tell which of these two scenarios is more interesting to me. But in my opinion, no one puts their flawed ability to the use better than Yuji Itadori. For most of Jujutsu Kaisen, Yuji is technically powerless. Compared to other sorcerers, he doesn't have a flashy curse technique. What he does have is inhuman super strength and dysfunctional cursed energy control, which again sounds basic, but luckily, Gege knew how to take a flaw and turn it into a feature. Enter Divergent Fist. At first glance, it's not even a real technique. Rather, it's an unfortunate side effect of Yuji being unable to sync his cursed energy with his punches properly.
Yeah, since this was such a footnote in Jujutsu Kaisen, I didn't really think of it as that much of a weakness. Although Toto did say Divergent Fist wasn't as efficient as it could be if Yuji was using cursed energy attacks properly. So I guess it is a drawback, quote unquote, but Divergent Fist being a second hit after your first hit seems like a pretty good alternative. It's like doing 2 punches, but once he corrected his cursed energy attacks, then he started doing, I think, double damage, if not more damage per punch.
But because of this flaw, Yuji's attacks gain a delayed second impact. It's much weaker than a perfectly timed curse-infused punch, but if used properly, it does manage to catch opponents off guard. And that trade-off is what makes it interesting. Yuji is forced to fight with this handicap, but he does manage to use it to his advantage. Again and again, Divergent Fist is capable of messing with opponents' timing and opening up opportunities. And even after Yuji learns how to properly infuse his strikes, he still falls back on it when the timing is right, because even a flawed tool can be turned into a deadly weapon if used properly. So what is the point I'm trying to make? Well, it's simple. Flawed abilities are interesting because they force creativity. They demand a certain kind of growth, not just in raw power, but in how a character thinks. And that struggle, that tension, That give and take, that's where some of the most compelling storytelling happens. When abilities are too clean, too perfect, too convenient, they stop being tools for character development and just become bait for flashy animation sequences or
Yeah, that was my biggest problem with solo leveling. Like, damn, every time we saw Sung Jing Woo, like, get stronger, like, nothing would be able to stop him. Like, I found his mutation at the very end to be so BS. It's like, come on, he was already so powerful, and yet he's going against his toughest opponent yet, and boom, instantly, he becomes stronger than that opponent. Like he was over leveled for this encounter, and then the game slash world chooses to boost him up even more. Yeah, I would say that was boring, but the animation was fire though. I'm not gonna say the series was good slash the season, but I mean that was good animation and that entertained me.
Sakuga compilations. But when they're unpredictable, risky, or dangerous to the user, that's when characters rise above their limits, not just by overpowering the enemy, but also by outsmarting their own flaws. So yeah, no one is denying the fact that endgame power-ups are cool. Everyone loves seeing a protagonist at their peak, but I'll always have a soft spot for that messy middle stage, where the protagonist is still figuring it out, where every fight feels like a gamble, and when victory really and truly means something, because it's those moments of hopeful desperation that make a story compelling in the first place. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this breakdown,
Yeah, that was a great video. It is interesting to see when the main hero has to deal around their weakness. So, overall, I enjoyed the video. I think he made some great points. Love the triangle. I don't know if that's his thing that he came up with or if that's like an actual writing trope or writing structure. Very informative, and I enjoyed the video. So, I hope you guys will give his video a like and subscribe to his channel. Maybe give him a share. Pint is here is his channel if you guys want to find him in the description of my video too. And anyway, if you guys enjoyed my reaction, please make sure to follow me on all my social medias like my Twitter, my Twitch, my YouTube, my DLive, my TikTok, my Kick, Rumble, Odyssey, and Patreon. And check out my second YouTube channel, and like and comment on all my videos, and even join my Discord. There you can stay up to date with everything I choose to do, or my streams, videos, or anything else. But yeah, I hope to see you guys next time. Bye.